wreckers and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer, who's on the other side of the camera. Welcome, Christopher. And welcome, everybody. We have Mark and the Millennials, and this particular podcast is called Economy Wreckers. And of course, what better wrecker of the economy other than Joe Biden would be Governor Whitmer of Michigan, otherwise known as Governor Half-Whitmer. So Governor Whitmer of Michigan decided in her infinite wisdom, even though the Colonial Pipeline has been hacked on the East Coast, Governor Whitmer decided to move forward with trying to close down a pipeline in her own state, because naturally it's always about what? Climate change. So Governor Whitmer decided that in the midst of the massive gas shortages that are occurring throughout the eastern United States, that just isn't enough misery for the country. She decided that she's actually going to shut down a pipeline in her own state. The state claims that Enbridge, it's a pipeline called Enbridge, repeatedly violated the 1953 easement, allowing the company to operate dual pipelines in the Straits of Mackinac to transport petroleum and other products. And so, Governor Whitmer decided that the easement, therefore, is being revoked and terminated, according to a release from the governor's office. Whitmer also argued operating dual pipelines interferes with Michigan's solemn duty to protect the Great Lakes under the public trust doctrine. It's pretty clear that Whitmer doesn't have the people of Michigan's best interests at heart. She was with, and always has been with, the massive corruption circling the 2020 election in the state, and her actions in dealing with the coronavirus was also insane, and by the way, continues to be insane. Remember, this is the same governor that decided that hardware stores during peak COVID in 2020 could be open. However, there were sections of the hardware stores that could not be open, including the sections that sold seeds. So that was particularly funny because naturally people were quarantined. They had to stay home. And at least in Michigan, they wanted them to stay inside. But obviously, when the weather got better in 2020, people are like, well, why don't I just grow a garden? I have nothing else to do. You go to the hardware store, it's like, no, you can't buy seeds. That section is closed off. So here is what PBS NewsHour says about Governor Whitmer's decision to mess with this pipeline situation. And it says, company defies Michigan governor's order to close the pipeline. Of course, keep in mind, this is PBS NewsHour in Michigan. Traverse City, Michigan, an upper Midwestern oil pipeline, continued operating Wednesday despite a shutdown demand from Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer that the operator warned could lead to fuel disruptions similar to those resulting from a cyber attack on the East Coast system. Whitmer ordered Line 5 of the pipeline closed last November because of the potential for a spill in a channel linking two of the Great Lakes. As her May 12th deadline arrived, Canadian pipeline company Enbridge said only the federal government has regulatory authority over its operations. Enbridge, backed by numerous chambers of commerce and the Republican legislators in Michigan, seized on last week's hack of the Colonial Pipeline, which delivers about 45% of the gasoline consumed on the East Coast. The resulting shutdown led to panic buying that has left thousands of filling stations without fuel and motorists in long lines. It's also my understanding, by the way, that half of all gas stations have no gasoline now on much of the East Coast. The cyber attack that triggered an unplanned temporary closure brings to the forefront what consumers could face, said Mike Moeller, Enbridge's Director of Operations for Great Lakes Region. Without Line 5, consumers would shoulder the burden of supply disruptions and related price increases, particularly for propane and transportation fuel. Whitmer's office said in a statement that the Colonial Pipeline interruption shows the danger of relying heavily on a single energy supply. Well, she's the one that wants to shut it down. That's why Governor Whitmer has put in place a plan to protect jobs, diversify and expand our renewable energy resources, and ensure Michigan's energy needs are met, while also taking action to get the oil out of the water as soon as possible. So let's reread this. Okay, so Governor Whitmer wants to shut down this pipeline, which is going to cause uh, slowdowns in delivery of transportation and fuel, just like what's happening on the East Coast. But now she wants this to happen in Canada and in Michigan. And so her statement to the press is as follows, quote, "It shows the danger of relying heavily on a single energy supply. That's why Governor Whitmer has put in place a plan to protect jobs." What? She's going to shut it down? That's not going to protect jobs. "Diversify and expand our renewable energy resources and ensure Michigan's energy needs are met." Well, they can't be met if you shut down the pipeline. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why Democrats are economy wreckers. They don't know how to run. They don't know how to run an economy. They don't know how to run anything, but they do know how to wreck things. And that is exactly what she is doing. So, as you might imagine, Enbridge, the pipeline operator and owner, has said that they're not going to shut down their pipeline. They're defying Governor Whitmer's order. So, Governor Whitmer now is threatening to take their profit. She's threatening to expropriate the company, as exactly what you do in Marxism, right? If you don't listen to me, I'm going to shut you down. Well, and if you're not going to shut down, I'm going to expropriate you. I'm going to steal your profits. Karl Marx would be proud, Governor Half-Whitmer. So here again, we have PBS NewsHour, and it says as follows. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer threatened Tuesday to go after Enbridge's profits from a Great Lakes oil pipeline if the company defies her order to shut it down. The Democrat governor issued the warning in a letter to the Canadian Energy Transport Company on the eve of a state-imposed deadline to halt operation of Line 5, which moves oil through northern Wisconsin and Michigan to refineries in Ontario. Enbridge repeated its intention to defy Whitmer's demand. A nearly 4-mile long, 6.4 kilometer long section of Line 5 divides into two pipes that cross the bottom of the Straits of Mackinac, which connects Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. Whitmer, backed by environmentalists and native tribes, says the segment is vulnerable to a catastrophic spill in the cold, swirling channel. She didn't say that it had spilled. She said that it's vulnerable. So if it's vulnerable to a spill, then why don't you study the issue and have experts come up with plans to make sure that that doesn't happen? And I'm sure that there are ways, right? But naturally, that's not what she's interested in. She just wants to knock it out. She wants to close it down. She wants to steal their profits because she wants you to live on renewable energy. I'm just saying, how's that working on the East Coast right now? Because even if you have a Tesla on the East Coast and you're able to plug it in, at some point, if that oil pipeline, the Colonial oil pipeline, isn't restarted, of course, it's supposed to be restarted this weekend, but to the extent that it isn't restarted and delays continue, a lot of power plants are going to go down as well. And that means that if you have a Tesla, you can't get power. So way to go, Governor Whitmer. So Whitmer also revoked an easement last November that Michigan had granted in 1953 for the pipes to occupy the lake bottom and ordered them closed by May 12th. Well, that's basically, this week, of course. And so this epic battle is continuing in Michigan, and Governor Whitmer doesn't seem to care what is happening in the rest of the country with respect to people not being able to drive to work. So here's an example. If you are a plumber and you have 5 emergency calls today, and your first stop before you get to those emergency calls is the gas station, and there's no gasoline. So guess what? You can't drive to help these individuals who have emergencies that are plumbing emergencies. Same thing with electricians. Same thing with carpenters. And what about emergency personnel like ambulances and fire trucks and police officers? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a pretty serious matter, and Democrats don't take anything that deals with actual reality of economics seriously because they just want to wreck the economy, because if they wreck the economy, then they can rebuild it in their own image, but they won't be able to do that because they can't build anything. And so here's Channel 4 in Detroit. Channel 4 News in Detroit reporting on this particular issue with Governor Half-Whitmer. We have that clip, and here it is.
Enbridge's Line 5 runs under the Straits of Mackinac, and both the governor and Attorney General Dana Nessel campaigned on shutting down the 68-year-old pipeline, which they believe poses a serious threat to the Great Lakes. The company had entered into a deal with former Governor Snyder to build a tunnel around the pipeline and is fighting Whitmer's shutdown order. And then you have the government of Canada furious at Whitmer because it would cut off about half of the energy supply for central Canada. The whole imbroglio is being fought out in federal court, but the state Senate heard from those who count on the pipeline for their livelihoods today.
Closing Line 5 would have a devastating and cascading effect on our economy, some known, but many of which are not fully understood. What we do know for certain is that there would be a shortage of roughly 756,000 gallons of propane a day, and price hikes would likely occur almost immediately.
Yeah, so price hikes would occur immediately. And of course, that's what Whitmer wants, and that's what the Democrats want, because if you boost the prices in a massive way of fossil fuels, then people will, of course, according to the Democrats, they will flee fossil fuels and they will go to renewables such as solar and wind and electric cars, as an example. At least that's what the Democrats think. But in the meantime, they don't seem to understand that what's going to happen is that people will be without power. People will be without transportation. But they're okay with that because, we might have to go through a 20-year transition where you don't have a car and you have to use a bicycle to get where you're going, and you can't really power your house. That's just too bad, according to Governor Whitmer. So if not enough, Jen Psaki, the president of the United States press secretary, was asked about Governor Whitmer's decision to shut down the Enbridge pipeline. And of course, Jen Psaki is already being besieged because of the Colonial Pipeline hack, which shut it down from the Russian hackers. And of course, it's a legit question for the press to say, hey, Jen Psaki, you're the press secretary. What does the president of the United States think about the Enbridge pipeline shutdown? At least the attempt to do that by Governor Whitmer. We have Jen Psaki. We have her response. We also have the question set up. And here's the clip.
Does President Biden agree with Governor Whitmer's decision on the oil and gas pipeline? She's citing essentially water quality issues. It's really angered Canada. Does President Biden agree with that decision?
I'd have to take a closer look at the pipeline. I mean, we have been evaluating in a case-by-case scenario. Which pipeline are you talking about?
The Enbridge.
The Enbridge one. We look at each pipeline through the prism of the impact on the environment and also the impact on the economy, and we make assessments. So I'd have to talk to our team if that assessment's been concluded or not.
So we look at Enbridge, the pipeline, and then we look at we assess the economy and its impact on the economy. And then, after we do the assessment, then we'll let you know. I mean, what kind of leadership is that? I mean, obviously it's a federal issue, because it's a pipeline that is not just crossing state lines, but it's crossing country lines. It's a federal issue. And Whitmer wants to usurp the issue. And we're going to get to why she wants to usurp the issue. I'm sure you already know, because of climate change. But notwithstanding that, we have the fact that Jen Psaki is just not taking it seriously. It's like, oh, by the way, on the East Coast, people can't get any gasoline because the gasoline stations, for the most part, are out of gasoline. At least half of them are. We're concerned about getting enough fuel to the airports for the airplanes because of the Colonial Pipeline hack. What say you, Jen Psaki, about the Enbridge pipeline closure proposal by Governor Whitmer and the fact that she wants to expropriate their profits? And Jen Psaki's response is, well, we really take these things into consideration and just really want to study them. We're going to study them and just see what the reaction. It's just ridiculous. So Governor Whitmer, the same person who wants to shut all of this down because of climate change, violated her own stay-at-home order. This was reported last year, but she violated her own stay-at-home order and went to Florida because she said her father was ailing and she wanted to visit him. Apparently that wasn't true, but what's more important is the fact that this is the same Governor Whitmer that is trying to close pipelines and took a private jet owned by a very rich businessman. And she took the private jet to Florida. You and I can't take private jets. They cost a fortune. And obviously, politicians can't do it either unless they reimburse, using their own money, the private jet owner, which, of course, Apparently, as far as we know, she has not done that yet. So this particular matter continues to come back to haunt her every time she tries to do something really woke, like close the Enbridge pipeline. And so now the story is fomenting back to the top, and we have actually Channel 4 Detroit reporting about this, and we have a clip on this that's really hysterical. I want you to listen closely about who one of the actual owners of the jet is. Okay, it's a chemical company. Listen to this. We have the clip. Here it is.
The governor's not saying she flew on this plane, pictured in Federal Aviation Administration records and owned by a company called Air Eagle. Air Eagle said in a statement that it had no comment about any part of this controversy. Now, Level 4 News checked the plane's ownership, and it comes up under the address of Detroit company PVC Chemicals, whose chairman is well-known Detroit businessman Jim Nicholson. But we've also confirmed that Nicholson is partnered in Air Eagle with Ambassador Bridge company owner Matthew Maroon and the Cotton family, formerly of Meridian Health. Now, FAA records also show the plane made the city airport to Lansing to Palm Beach and back trip on March 12th and March 15th. Private air travel costs many thousands of dollars, which begs the question, if the governor did make this flight, did she pay for it?
Yeah, that's the question. If she did go on the flight, which apparently she did she actually reimburse the private businessman's jet company and pay what the market value would be if you were to take a private jet? That is the requirement when you're a public official. Except that, isn't it interesting? This is the governor, Half-Whitmer, who's all in on climate change and takes a private jet, okay, which obviously has an enormous CO2 footprint. And then at the same time says nothing about it, doesn't really try to explain herself. And at the same time wants to shut down the Enbridge pipeline. And one of the owners of the private jet, he said it was PVC Chemicals. It's not, it's PVS Chemicals, because if you actually watch the video, you'll see the PVS Chemical Company is one of the companies that owns the private jet. So she's okay getting on a private jet, which creates climate change, especially if it's owned by a chemical company, which I'm sure causes climate change. And that's all fine, according to Governor Half-Whitmer. But Enbridge pipeline must close. So we've heard this a million times, right? You have these elected officials, and they have one set of rules for themselves and one set of rules for the serfs, like all of us. And I can only hope that the citizens of Michigan will at some point unelect her. And there are a lot of really good candidates that I think are going to be coming up in Michigan who are going to run against her, because I believe she is going to run for re-election. I can imagine how she thinks she's going to win, because she's obviously upsetting lots of different interests, and then she has no solution. So here's the thing, podcast listeners. When you want to be super woke and you want to shut down a pipeline because you're a Democrat, before you decide to do that, and before you decide to wreck the economy, you might want to have a real solution actually in place to take its place. But the Democrats don't have that solution. Their solution is shut it down, and then everybody will scramble to fix everything themselves and figure out ways of getting power themselves and to power their vehicles. And you're on your own, though. But they have nothing in place because Democrats don't build anything. They're incapable of building things. They only ban things. They have no real understanding of how the economy works. And that's Governor Whitmer is an economy wrecker. So next up, podcast listeners, there's a 25-foot statue at Rockefeller Center, and it was just unveiled. And it's a 25-foot statue, according to Gateway Pundit. It was just unveiled in New York City at Rockefeller Center to honor African culture. We actually have a clip on this, and we're only going to play the clip just briefly because it's only 19 seconds. And there's really nothing to listen to. It's just the statue being unveiled. And so you'll be able to see that. And I don't know about you guys, but look, this is my opinion, right? And art is an opinion thing, in my opinion. We can have 10 different people look at a work of art, a sculpture or a painting, and, some of them will like it, some of them won't. Some of them are somewhat neutral. I would imagine you would also have some that are offended, of course, but Here's what the New York Times said in New York City. The New Yorker said this in New York City about the removal of the Teddy Roosevelt statue. Okay, they remember the Teddy Roosevelt statue? Well, that was removed. And when I look at the Teddy Roosevelt statue, I see Teddy Roosevelt and I see a work of art. That's what I see, because it is in front of the American Museum of Natural History. But that had to be removed. That had to be removed. And in front of Rockefeller Center, understandably, these are two different buildings. But instead of in front of Rockefeller Center, which is also a building, a work of art as architecture, because it is classic Art Deco. It is a stunningly beautiful and timeless building. It absolutely is. If you've ever not just seen the outside, but if you've seen the inside, it is absolutely beautiful. They put this artwork, this 25-foot African artwork, in front of Rockefeller Center. So first, before we go into that a little bit more, here's what the New Yorker said about getting rid of the statue of Teddy Roosevelt. They said on the 21st, June 21st of last year, of course, the American Museum of Natural History made the clear-eyed decision to remove a racist equestrian statue of Theodore Roosevelt from its front steps. In the monument, Roosevelt towers over top of an indigenous man and a black man whose roles in the bronze, beyond literalizing the myth of white supremacy through the subordinate placement, are to carry Roosevelt's guns. And of course, you can imagine where the New Yorker article goes from there, because of the fact that it doesn't recognize it as art. Because even though it's in front of a museum of art, American art, it recognizes it as a racist sculpture. So I'm just curious, if you're looking at this 25-foot African sculpture, which is black, is it possible that you could interpret that as a racist sculpture? I don't know. Or could you just look at it from another perspective and say, I think it's really incredibly ugly. And it's not ugly because it's black. It's ugly because the actual artwork itself is incredibly unappealing, which is kind of where I stand on this. So here is what the Smithsonian Magazine says about the racist statue of Theodore Roosevelt. So it literally says in the Smithsonian Magazine, obviously the largest and best museum in the world, it says, the racist statue of Theodore Roosevelt will no longer loom over the American Museum of Natural History. It said that last year, June 23rd of 2020. That's the Smithsonian Magazine, the racist statue. Just like the New Yorker, it went on and on and on. And so this year, about 1 year later, the same magazine, the Smithsonian Magazine, says the following about the new 25-foot statue. It says, this monumental oracle, I guess that's its name, the oracle statue in New York City subverts traditional sculpture. Yeah, that's an understatement. It undermines art as far as I'm concerned. It subverts art. And it says, in the Smithsonian Magazine, part of an ongoing exhibition at Rockefeller Center, Sanford Bigger's newest installation challenges the tropes of classical artwork. Because if you have classical artwork, it's not a good thing, according to the Smithsonian Magazine. And it just read a short, brief paragraph in this. It says, references to classical mythology abound in and around Rockefeller Center, an iconic Art Deco complex in New York City. The space boasts a gilded bronze sculpture of the Titan Prometheus, a 1930s relief of a fearsome Zeus that adorns the 30 Rockefeller Plaza entrance, and a statue of an overburdened Atlas that looms over Fifth Avenue. And now, of course, we're going to have a 25-foot tall, 15,280-pound bronze sculpture, which is made by Sanford Biggers, and it's called the Oracle. The work depicts a person or deity with an enormous head who sits majestically on a throne in front of Rockefeller Center's Fifth Avenue entrance. And Chris, our producer, can hopefully show this again right now so you can just see them unveiling this and how incredibly silly this is? I just look, this is now we have wokeness coming into art. Okay. Because if you look at the existing art that I mentioned at Rockefeller Center and elsewhere, these are all true works of art, and you can certainly judge them accordingly. But the new art is all political art, right? It's either politically correct art or it's not. If it's not politically correct, which means it's not woke, it must be removed. If it's politically correct, then it must be installed. And the idea of woke art, I must tell you, so far, from what I've seen so far, is incredibly ugly. I mean, it's really unattractive. And it has nothing, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say this again, has nothing to do with the color of the art or what it represents. It has to do with the art itself. Just not attractive. I mean, just get rid of it. So next up, podcast listeners, a Texas bill would ban the label meat or beef if it's plant-based. That's actually true. There's a bill in Texas that would ban the label meat or beef if the product is plant-based. And so the authors of this bill argue that this is not meat or beef and should not be labeled as such. And you can only imagine that there are so many corporations out there that are trying, well, Bill Gates is one of the individuals who's trying to convince you to no longer eat meat because of climate change. And naturally, what they want to do is they want to market these products and put on them that they're meat or they taste like meat. Great meat taste, right? And if you put that on a package and you said great meat taste, you would think that it's meat because, hey, it tastes like meat. It must be meat. Well, Texas is saying, no, you can't actually do that. It's either meat or it's not meat. And if it's not meat, you cannot actually put the wording on there and confusing consumers. So House Bill 316, which was approved after a brief debate, is intended to prohibit companies from misleading consumers if a company produces food from insects, plants, or cell cultures, not slaughtered animals. They will not be allowed to use the labels meat, pork, poultry, or beef. This is for those who choose to eat meat, but it's also for those who choose to not eat meat, said Texas State Representative Brad Buckley, who also introduced the bill, according to the Austin American-Statesman. A label that would remain with this bill would be burger, for instance. Other states have attempted to file similar bills, and companies have fought back. Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers have filed lawsuits, citing free speech on the issue. Interesting. So Beyond Meat, of course, is that company that is making hamburgers, and they allegedly taste like hamburgers. I'm sure they don't. I haven't tried them yet, to be fair. But they are meat substitutes. It's not actually meat. And Beyond Meat's saying, well, that's not right. We're gonna sue you, Texas, because we want to fool people to tell them that what we're selling is actually meat. Well, their kind of name suggests Beyond Meat that it's probably not meat. However, who knows what they're putting on the packaging, so you really don't know. I actually like the fact when products are properly labeled and they actually have the ingredients that are noted in the product. I think that's really a good thing, so you know exactly what it is that you're buying and what you're eating. Apparently, Beyond Meat doesn't want you to know, because if you knew that, you probably wouldn't buy the product and support it. What they should put on Beyond Meat, though, is save the planet, don't eat meat. So here's what the sponsor said. Our goal here today with this bill is to have clear and accurate labeling so the consumer has no doubt what they're purchasing, Buckley said. The most frequent call I've gotten is from vegetarians that are for this bill. It is not anti-plant-based, anti-cell culture, he later added. It's interesting. I have to be honest, I don't think anyone is being tricked when purchasing a plant-based meat, unless you're someone that just grabs the cheapest meat in the aisle, which is never the plant-based option. From what I've seen, they're always more expensive. These boxes are clearly labeled with what you're getting, and I think everyone knows it's not meat or beef or whatever. Well, I have a feeling that as the woke culture, the same culture that wants to shut down pipelines and to stop cows and pigs and so forth from being produced in the United States, they want to also stop you from eating meat. As that culture gains more and more power, the Democrats, they want to ban now what you can and can't eat. And if they can ban what you can and can't eat, then let's face it, they're going to lie to you about what it is that you're actually buying in the grocery store. And that's what Democrats do, right? They can't really get you to try it voluntarily. They have to force it upon you. And the way they force it upon you is to ban it, to ban the growing and raising of cattle and the growing and raising of pigs and chickens and so forth. Something they've been trying to do for a very, very long time, and everyone knows it. And that is Texas passes truth in meat legislation. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the Chicago Principles. No safe spaces. Say no to safe spaces. Yeah, that's what we should call this. Say no to safe spaces. And it's called the Chicago Principles. This is a thing, by the way. So the University of Chicago has been really concerned throughout its history and founding about free expression at the university, and also about engaging in and allowing anyone to come to the university. And so the University of Chicago has these principles that they adopted called the Chicago Principles. And the Chicago Principles, the purpose of them is to make sure that students and professors alike understand that no matter where you are on the campus, you can speak freely, especially in the classroom as well. And then the idea that you need a safe space is not going to happen, because the whole purpose of the university is to exchange ideas, especially ideas about which you may disagree, and ideas that actually challenge your conventional thinking. That is what a true liberal arts education is about. A liberal arts education challenges your conventional wisdom about things and strengthens your arguments about what you believe, and sometimes may actually change your mind on things, but you make up your own mind. Of course, that is not what's happening in most universities, but University of Chicago, understanding what is happening in most universities, that is to say, uninviting speakers because they're not part of the woke culture, or they hold opinions that are offensive, which is, of course, antithetical to liberal arts education. The whole idea is to listen to all kinds of things about which you may agree or disagree. So the Chicago Principles were adopted, and they were adopted by the Board of Trustees at the university. And in 2014, President Robert Zimmer, and then Provost Eric Isaacs appointed a committee at the university faculty, and to articulate the university's overarching commitment to free, robust, and uninhibited debate. The resulting Chicago Principles have since been adopted at 81 colleges and universities. Now, given the fact that there were thousands of, local colleges, community colleges, state colleges, and state universities and private universities across the United States, and that only 81 have adopted this, is not a good thing, but at least 81 have. That's another way of looking at it. It's 81 more than before the Chicago Principles were adopted. So Paul Alivisatos, he's the president of the University of Chicago. We have a clip with him and also Hannah Holborn Gray. And the president of the University of Chicago, Paul Alivisatos, you're going to hear this clip of him talking about the Chicago Principles and why it's necessary. And we're going to talk about this a little bit in detail. First up, here's the clip.
Free expression is actually under challenge in an ongoing way. We're not in a unique time when this is happening. We're repeating a pattern that has been going on for a very long time on university campuses and in the country as a whole. When I started seeing potential speakers being disinvited at other university campuses, I knew that this was counter to our culture and that it was something that would not be happening at the University of Chicago. So we commissioned this faculty committee to write what has subsequently become known as the Chicago Principles. The central point is that the university is there to be an umbrella for multiple perspectives, and the university will not stop speech because some collection of people think the speech is wrong or offensive.
The university will not stop speech because some group of people find that speech offensive. Imagine that being said on so many of the other campuses across America. The opposite is being said, actually. In most universities, what is being said instead is, if you say things that are not woke, if you say that you don't believe in climate change, if you say that you want them to prove climate change and define exactly what climate change is, if you say that you support Donald Trump, if you say that you believe that the election of 2020 had a lot of question marks because of the way the election laws were changed without the approval of the legislatures in many of the swing states, if you say many of the things that I just mentioned, and you say them on many campuses across the United States of America, you will be potentially, I don't know, I think in some cases, ostracized. The professors may try to give you a bad grade. They may ask you to leave. Who knows? Who knows? What we do know is this, that there's a university, there's actually a college that's not too far from where I live, and it's considered an honors college, okay? It's considered an honors college, a public honors college. And that public honors college always has the most left of leftists coming on campus and speaking about the farthest left issues you can possibly imagine, but they never have balance. Never. And I remember when I brought this up recently on a radio station, there were call-ins. I mean, the phones were lit up, and a number of the call-ins were from individuals who were very upset about what I was saying because they had affiliations with that university and that particular college. And they called up saying, oh, well, we had this one guy who was a conservative and he came down and spoke. And I'm like, you're missing the point. You have, for every 100 people you have come speaking at your college and that are far left, you have one conservative. That's not teaching the students to be robust learners. You're basically indoctrinating them because you're terrified, actually, of having diversity of thought on your school. And the Chicago principals are essentially saying, we encourage diversity of thought, something that is missing in so many corners of academia in the United States. So here's Hannah Holborn Gray. She's president emeritus of the University of Chicago, explaining the Chicago principles. She just nails it. And here's the clip.
At a time when there have been quite a number of incidents that some unpopular speaker be disinvited, the University of Chicago has been a leader in its very clear reactions, which is that we don't do those things because someone might be offended. The point of education is not to make you comfortable, it's to make you think. People need to be able to speak for themselves in ways that create not only your own independence, but in a way to fortify your own courage and your readiness to become part of a larger world where those things are going to happen frequently.
The point of education is not to make you comfortable, it's to make you think. I mean, amen to that. And if you don't do that while you're in higher ed, if you are in a university environment or a college environment that disallows diversity of thought, then what will you be as a citizen when you go out into the world after college? You're going to be offended every time someone says something that you haven't heard before. It's like, well, that wasn't allowed on my university campus. You shouldn't be able to say that out here in the real world. That just should not be allowed. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we had all of the riots in 2020, because so many of those individuals that were rioting were white, rich leftists from, far left-wing universities who were rioting, and they were rioting because they hadn't heard any of the awful things that had been said before from the White House and from Republicans and from so many other people, because it challenged their conventional wisdom, and that's not allowed. And it's just so fascinating to hear Hannah Holborn Gray, president emeritus of the University of Chicago, talk about the Chicago principles and really succinctly say it, which is, we like opposing ideas here. That's the whole idea of going to a university. And that's the whole idea of a liberal education, because it challenges your conventional wisdom. And isn't that a good thing? And so, speaking of which, in the Wall Street Journal, cheating at colleges and school in general is easier than ever. And it's rampant, according to the Wall Street Journal. And that is because of the remote learning environment. So a year of remote learning has spurred an eruption of cheating among students from grade school to college, with many students isolated at home over the past year. And with a mass of online services at their disposal, academic dishonesty has never been so easy. Websites that allow students to submit questions for experts to answer have gained millions of new users over the past year. A newer breed of site allows students to put up their own classwork for action. Consider hiring me to do your assignment, reads a bid from one auction site. I work fast, pay close attention to the instruction, and deliver a plagiarism-free paper. Some educators fear the new generation of cheaters will be loath to stop even after the pandemic recedes. Students have found a way to cheat, and they know it works, said Thomas Lancaster, senior teaching fellow in computing at Imperial College in London, who has reliably studied academic integrity issues for more than 2 decades. He said cheating sites number in the thousands, from individuals to large-scale operations. Concerned about his North Carolina State University students cheating in a statistics class, Tyler Johnson launched a plan. For the final exam, Mr. Johnson, a course coordinator, said he used a computer program that generated a unique set of questions for each student. Those questions quickly showed up on a for-profit homework website that helped him to identify who posted them. About 200 students were caught cheating. 1/4 of the class. The producer is laughing. Okay, so overall, because, I feel like anyone who has been in K-12, which is pretty much everybody, and or college, those kids who are like the perpetual cheaters. You just know who they are. They're always trying to game the system. It doesn't matter whether you're learning remotely or you're learning exclusively in the class. You know who they are, and it's the same people. They're always trying to game the system. So the Wall Street Journal continues, about 200 students were caught cheating, 1/4 of the class. Overall, cases of academic dishonesty more than doubled in the 2019-20 academic year at North Carolina State, with the biggest uptick as students made the transition to online learning. Well, ladies and gentlemen, how incredibly obvious would that be, right? Because if you're learning online, then you're probably taking the test online. And if you're testing online, then isn't it kind of obvious that what you want to do and what you're probably going to do is to have all of your literature and learning materials around you, even if the professor says you're not allowed to do it. And then you can game the camera, of course, and put all kinds of Zoom backgrounds up to make it look like you're actually only there alone in front of the computer with no learning materials. I just want you guys to know, I'm not suggesting that you do this. I'm not even close suggesting that you do this, because I was not one of those people. I really wasn't. I did not cheat in college. It's just not something that I thought was useful because, and here's why, I was spending so much money to go to college and I had to pay for college myself. I had to borrow all this money that I'm like, it would be really dumb. What would be the point for me to be cheating in college and spending all this money? I mean, it would make no sense, right? I kind of really need to learn this stuff in order to be successful. But on the other hand, we didn't have Zoom, right? We didn't have a pandemic when I was in college, and we also didn't have Zoom. And if we didn't have Zoom, then it kind of, you kind of got caught really quickly by the professor because he stood right there, or the proctor stood right there watching you when you were taking the test. Not so in the current environment, just not quite as easy to do. So as a result, you have to understand that more and more students are figuring out how to game the system, and it's a big problem. And as a result of that, I think most colleges are going to really need to get kids back into the school. But back to the principal part of this segment, the Chicago principles. I just want to say this to you podcast listeners. The Chicago principles should be adopted by every single public school in America. And they should be adopted, by the way, I'm talking about every single K-12 public school in America should be adopted. They should adopt the Chicago principles. And we played those 2 clips for you. And those 2 clips and the Chicago principles are in writing, and they are worth looking at and getting your local public school system to adopt. You should also get your local colleges and universities to adopt them. And when they do adopt, and by the way, why wouldn't they? Right? Why wouldn't they? And then once they do adopt them, the second they violate them and say, oh no, we can't have that guy come and speak to the college because he's just too much of a lightning rod. It's like, grow up. Grow up. As Hannah Holborn Gray said, the president emeritus of the University of Chicago, people need to be challenged in college about their conventional wisdom about things. And if they aren't, then how are they going to be able to cope when they go out to society and they're challenged on a daily basis, including at their jobs? This is what makes America a great country, because we should not be afraid of ideas that challenge our conventional wisdom and conventional thought. Diversity of thought is a good thing. So kudos to the University of Chicago on the Chicago principles. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Of course. Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is banning lawnmowers in California. Yes, you heard that correctly. In California, they want to ban lawn mowers because, you know, when you have lawn mowers, they're just really a bad thing. And what more should you do? Well, ban everything that has to do with lawn equipment that relates to gasoline. And that is the goal in California. And so we have a couple of assembly members in California who have decided to do just that. So the California legislature, this is according to ABC News 10, proposes a bill that would ban the sale of new gas-powered lawnmowers and leaf blowers, among other things. The bill was recently introduced to the California legislature that would phase out gas-powered engines completely that are used for lawn equipment. And so the article continues, 2 California assembly members have introduced a piece of legislation that would phase out all of that outdoor power equipment. Assembly members Mark Berman, Democrat of Menlo Park, of course he's a Democrat, and Lorena Gonzalez, Democrat of San Diego, put forth AB 1346, that's the bill number, which proposes stopping the sale of new gas-powered small off-road engines, which they use this, they use an acronym, SOAR, S-O-R-E, all caps. Gas-powered small off-road engines, SOAR, only in California, right? You can't use SOAR. Primarily used for leaf blowers and lawnmowers. The bill would also require all new sales of SOAR to be zero emission by at least 2024. The new legislation is tied to California's attempts to mitigate the impacts of climate change. It's time to phase out these super polluters. Quote, they're not only bad for our environment, but can cause serious health issues for workers who utilize them every day, Assemblywoman Gonzalez said in a press release. According to the press release, SOAR are engines that use a relatively low amount of power, roughly 25 horsepower, but have a large impact that can be especially harmful to air quality. Quote, today, operating the best-selling gas-powered commercial leaf blower for 1 hour emits air pollutants comparable to driving a 2017 Toyota Camry from Los Angeles to Denver, Assembly member Berman said. Sorry, but I'm not really sure that I believe that. And the other thing, too, is if there are alternatives to these gas-powered leaf blowers, and I know what you're going to say is, yes, there are electric leaf blowers, and there are electric lawnmowers. Yes, I know that. I know they exist. Why aren't people adopting them? Are they really better? They need to be better. and they need to be cheaper, and they need to be more efficient. They need to work better in order for people to adopt them. We don't need government to ban. And unfortunately, that is the Democrat way. It's ban, 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 ban. So here is one of the sponsors, Assemblymember Mark Berman, in 2019 talking about his cap and trade bill. We wanted to play this because naturally, if you're an assemblyman in California, you got to talk about cap and trade because that is the premise under which you get to ban whatever you want in life that has to do with climate change. And we have that clip from Mark Berman, and here it is.
Tonight, the California legislature took a critical step forward in stabilizing our world-leading cap and trade program, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and also reducing air pollutants and toxics in our most vulnerable communities in California. While these bills weren't perfect, they were a good compromise that was able to achieve the 2/3 vote thresholds necessary to make sure that there be no legal challenges to both of these bills.
Yeah, because we don't want legal challenges to these bills because we're just going to force it upon you. And once we do the cap and trade bill, which they did, by the way, in 2019, it allowed them ever since in 2020, including during a pandemic, and in 2021, which we're now in, to go ahead and start banning one thing after another, all under the guise of climate change. So here's KSBY News in California, and they're reporting on this particular issue. And I just want you to, if you can't see it, I'll explain it. At the end, there's a reporter that they cut to, and he's reporting. It's like he's reading talking points from the Democrat Party, but he looks totally dazed and confused. It's really kind of funny. So only in California do they look dazed and confused, especially, probably Colorado too. But anyway, here's the clip.
But for some, a complete ban isn't the answer.
I think that these companies that create steel, Husqvarna, etc., can actually make these run on lower emissions like they do a car.
Now, cars are large producers of carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, but air regulators are concerned about the gases being emitted from these gardening tools, as they say they can be even more problematic. Reporting live in Santa Maria, I'm Alex Gonzalez, KSBY News.
You know, one way to regulate the air in California, if you're really concerned about air quality in California, one way to regulate the air is to stop illegal immigration into California, because obviously California has a lot of problems, but one problem in particular is you have too many people. There are too many people in California, especially coastal California, and much of that has occurred because of illegal immigration. And the more people you have, the more lawns you have, the more lawn equipment you have. I mean, wouldn't you even look at that? But of course, no. Californians don't want to look at that. Certainly not the elected officials. They just want to go ahead and make your life even harder by banning all of the tools that you need, the power tools that you need to be able to properly take care of your house on the outside, in which case by next year, that's when the law actually has the full force and effect in 2022, you are going to have to get rid of all of that lawn equipment statewide that you have that runs off of gasoline or diesel. I mean, it's just absurd. Because once again, Democrats don't believe in innovation. Democrats believe in forcing solutions upon you, but they actually don't want innovation to take hold and there to be alternative ideas other than just the one way that they want to show you. So they have to ban the thing that you're using to make life even more miserable. So here's CBS 8 in San Diego reporting on some of the fines for violating the law in Encinitas, California. And of course, this law is going to have fines as well, the statewide law that's banning lawnmowers. And so listen to this. It's like, out of all of the things that you can pass in California, right? You've got a pandemic, you can't go back to work, your kids aren't back to school, but we're going to fine you for using that lawnmower. Here is the clip.
In Encinitas, there are fines for those who violate the law. A $100 fine for a first offense, $200 for a second, and $1,000 for additional violations.
$100 for the first violation, $200 for the second violation, and $1,000 for the third violation for using a lawnmower that operates off of gasoline or diesel. How dare you? We're going to fine you because you are just a bad person. And you shouldn't be doing that, even though your kids aren't back in school, and even though you can't go back to work. We're going to fine you because that's what we do in California. Imagine like they're criminalizing the use of power equipment. That's really what this is. These are the dumbest people in America, without question, these legislators in California. At least they are this week. And that's the dumbest bill in America, banning lawn mowers in California. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.